Interest in the federal election campaign may be near an all-time high. While the cost of living and Trump's tariffs have dominated the conversation thus far, recent comments made by some candidates have now taken over the headlines. Starting today, Windsor Morning is hosting an election panel every Wednesday with local insiders from the three main parties. So let's dive in and meet them. For the NDP, Natyshak represented Essex as the MPP from 2011 to 2022. For the Conservatives, we have Teshuba, a former candidate who is now the vice president of the Riding Association in Windsor-West. And for the Liberals, Alicia Higgison is the vice president of the Riding Association in Windsor-Tecumseh-Lakeshore. She's also Tecumseh Town Councillor and former chair of the Public School Board. All three panelists are in our studio. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Amy. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. Well, since this is our first time together and the campaign is still relatively young, I want to start by gauging our expectations for the election. Looking at the CBC's poll tracker, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives seemed poised for an easy win up until about 2 weeks ago. Now the Liberals have a lead of about 6 points. So, Alicia, let's start with you. How are you feeling about the way things are going for the Liberals?
I mean, I'll be honest, I'm feeling pretty good. I was looking at some polls last night, and most of them, all of them have Liberals in the lead, and some of them have us as predicting a Liberal majority, which, as you know, is quite a switch from where we were just some short weeks ago. And so we're on a trending upswing. Of course, elections always matter, so it'll be an interesting next couple of weeks for sure. I think what it shows us is that Canadians are overwhelmingly centrist, and what they want is some stability right now. We're dealing with a threat to our sovereignty alongside the actual how we live our lives and the affordability of our lives. And I think that's Canadians are really looking for somebody they can trust and an adult in the room. And I think these poll numbers are showing that. And I think it's been really interesting to watch in the last week or so, watching some of those shift. And no offense to my colleague here to my right, but I think we've seen a bit of a collapse of the NDP vote, which maybe is contributing to some of that rise in the Liberal vote. And I think it's always interesting to watch how that happens.
And Al, how have the polls affected your optimism about the Conservatives taking power?
Me personally, I'm still very optimistic. I think the real polls is the enthusiasm metrics. You see Pierre Poilievre go to rallies and it is swamped. He's doing airport hangars. The numbers here in Windsor, the enthusiasm have never been stronger. We just had a great opening night for Harb Gill, for example, that just packed the house. We've never seen anything like this, to be straight with you. The demand for signs, the demands for change, it is on the streets. So as far as the polls, I mean, talk about bias in the polls and who they measure, who they call, do they stack it. I like to see what's on the ground. And on the ground, the message is we need change in Ottawa, in the region, to make sure we have seats at the governing table. Chris Lewis doing a great job in Essex. As far as the affordability issue, that's probably number one. Cutting the carbon tax, not only on the consumer level, but permanently in legislation at the House of Commons needs to happen. And we understand that we have to be able to sell our resources entirely, not just to the United States, but internationally. This means repealing C-69. And I think people want change. The Liberal NDP coalition had it, for 9 years, 10 years, and people want change, and we're going to see how it plays out, but I'm very optimistic.
And Taras, since the start of this year, the NDP has had its support in the polls drop from almost 20% down to single digits. How concerning is that for you?
Well, this is early days in this campaign. So the first week of the campaign has been unlike any other that I've ever seen. We have to acknowledge the meteoric rise of the Liberal Party under Mark Carney, the conditions in which that has been brought about. A real and present threat from the United States. And that is, I think it's galvanized people around who will be best positioned to protect the things that matter to Canadians the most. And I think as we go further into this campaign, all candidates from all parties will be connecting with voters about what those things are, what those tangible things are that make us Canadian. And I think they're fundamental as protecting healthcare, protecting good paying jobs, our environment, ensuring that CPP is there. So those are messages that the New Democrats have always had in their wheelhouse. In fact, if New Democrats weren't in the House of Commons, you wouldn't have those things like universal health care. You wouldn't have pharmacare or dental care being present in our current country. So I think it's a matter of allowing this campaign to unfold. Things can happen very shortly, very quickly, as we know. And I think you'll see a leveling out of sort of that support as we get further into the campaign.
We're going to turn now to Trump's tariffs and our relationship with the United States. It's dominated headlines for quite a while now. Much of the campaign has had questions of which party and which leader is best positioned to stand up for Canada to protect trade and sovereignty. Taras, I'm going to stay with you on this topic. What kind of approach do you think needs to be taken?
I think it has to be an incredibly strong approach, and I think there is some understanding throughout all the parties that we have to have a consolidated message around what we stand for as Canadians, and that means reciprocal tariffs that actually cause as much harm to the United States economy as they are causing to us. I think you've seen Canadians come together through that message like never before. You even hear it from our Premier, Doug Ford, who has been one of the most vocal advocates for reciprocal tariffs and putting a lot of pressure on those individual states and governors and legislators to pressure their president to reverse this decision and change course. Look, it's today is freedom. What is Donald Trump calling it? Liberation Day. And I Doug and I have disagreed on many things, but I like what he said. It's termination day for a lot of good-paying jobs and manufacturing jobs in the United States, and of course here in our region, we know the effects of trade probably like no other region in Canada. So it is top of mind. It is the issue, and we'll see how each party positions itself to respond.
And Alicia, how satisfied have you been with Mark Carney's leadership during these early days as Prime Minister and the leader?
Actually, he was voted in by Liberals at an overwhelming amount, 87% is what we gave him a mandate to come out and do the things that he's been doing. I've been pretty happy with that so far. And I think Taras is right. I think there needs to be this real focus and this real decision on a real strong decision on what we're going to do about it. And I think Mark Carney being here in the first days of his campaign, announcing $2 billion for the sports for auto workers, really shows that having those Liberal voices here speaking about, if those tariffs hit us here on Liberation Day for the United States or Termination Day for us, it's really going to hit Windsor and Essex County the hardest, and we're going to feel it the longest. And so we really need somebody and voices here talking to the Prime Minister about these things. And I think Mark Carney has shown that he really feels what's going to happen here, and he really kind of understands what we need. He's talking about building around Canada and having good paying jobs and being able to shore up what we need here at home. And I think he's striking the right tone. And I think he's doing it with the right kind of policies and the right people.
And now, what about you? How would Pierre Poilievre lead differently if given a chance to be the Prime Minister?
Well, there would be a different cabinet in the governing party, and there certainly would be different messaging, and the messaging would be consistent to all the policies up to this point. Cutting the carbon tax, making Canada more business friendly. These are policies that have been consistent, not just last minute for the election. What is really nice, though, and I think Taras touched upon it, was that there is unity right now going on in the country, buying Canadian products, being more self-aware. Hopefully the discussions that the Conservatives have been talking about for a long time, getting rid of interprovincial trade. Pierre one time says, I found a great country to trade with. It's Canada. And it's true. Like we have more, from east to west, we have more restrictions and more tariffs than the United States. We need to be able to sell our products worldwide. We need to be better in trade. It's called Liberation Day. It's called Termination Day, I've heard. How about Freedom Day? Freedom from obstacles and regulations that have held us back from being extremely successful. Pierre Poilievre talks about this all the time, and this is what can make Canada very successful, not just for ourselves, but internationally as well.
We're going to turn now to candidate controversy. This week we heard about Paul Chang, a Liberal candidate in the Toronto area, resigning after days of criticism. This was for his comments that people should take a Conservative rival to the Chinese consulate to collect a bounty. Then yesterday, much closer to home, Windsor City Councillor Mark McKenzie was removed as the Conservative candidate for Windsor-Tecumseh-Lakeshore. This was for his comments he made on a podcast in 2022. We're going to play a piece of what he said on that podcast. Mark McKenzie and his co-host Chris Ptolemy were talking about keeping politicians accountable, and the conversation took a bit of a turn. Have a listen.
But I'm also in favor of public hangings, so I think they need to bring that back.
I kind of agree. Would you want the hangings? Yeah. I want the guillotine, I think.
You want the guillotine? No, I want the public hanging because it's longer.
Okay, well, I want the electrocution then at that point.
Oh, I think they should bring back the electric chair as well. But again, only if you're like 1,000,000% positive. Like, no, but you know what I mean. Like, I think death penalty, absolutely. Like,
I used to always
pedophiles,
be pro
like,
to the extent, but you look into it and you're like, yeah, ooh, that guy didn't do it. Shit.
But that's why I'm saying, like, you need to be like 100% certain, like 1,000,000% certain. Like, okay, that guy's a pedophile. There's video or there's proof, there's photos. You know what I mean? Something.
Mark McKenzie then went on to list some people who might be deserving of the death penalty, including Paul Bernardo, Charles Manson, Justin Trudeau. McKenzie has responded to this. He says he was joking, although he does believe in the needs for tougher crimes. Al, giving you a chance to respond as a conservative, what's your response to these stories about McKenzie and the Paul Chang?
Well, I've seen the stories all day yesterday. I think the story is actually going to start very quickly moving forward to who's the candidate in Windsor-Tecumseh. As far as party politics goes, it is a leader, party, candidate. And right now, the leader's very strong, popular throughout Canada. As far as the party, this is the values, the excitement in both ridings. It's not really overly surprising as far as how things played out. All national parties usually have policies with regards to statements, anything that can hurt the leader, hurt messaging, and so forth. Mark McKenzie is a terrific Ward 4 councillor. He's a low-tax guy like I am, but the party is going to move forward Windsor-Tecumseh. Probably the announcement will be soon. I think there's probably about 4 or 5 really good choices if they're choosing from the applicants, people who showed interest on it, and everyone should unite and move forward as they did in Windsor-West, and Chris Lewis is rock solid in Essex. So we'll see how things play out. It was a national story. It played out all day, but I think the story is definitely turning to now what's the next steps.
And Taras, as someone who's been elected, what are your thoughts about how candidates' backgrounds are looked into by parties?
Well, it speaks to the nature of the professionalism of the party and their vetting process. I don't know what the conditions were that brought about the appointment of Mr. McKenzie as a candidate, but obviously they didn't do their due diligence and background checked. And because this is, if you want to play in the big leagues, you got to understand that your online history is a part of your narrative. And I find it especially egregious for someone who currently holds public office and someone who was seeking public office who knows that they have made these comments, whether they were in jest or not. What we're talking about is democracy. And I've sat in the Ontario legislature, and if anyone's ever toured the chamber, it is exactly 2 sword lengths apart and an inch. And the reason we say that is because it's the foundation of our democracy. It means that we shall never cross swords to do battle or to fix our problems or our concerns. We will do it through a democratic process, through debate, through democracy and discussion. That's the principle that you should hold dear if you're seeking public office. And any joking or jest about it should just immediately disqualify you as a candidate.
Alicia, what are your thoughts? At first, the Liberals were willing to keep their candidate in the running, saying it was a lesson learned. Where do you see this line between accountability and cancel culture?
I'll say I wasn't particularly happy with the way that the Liberal Party handled Paul Chang. I do think it speaks to his integrity, that Paul Chang's integrity, that he stood aside and decided that he didn't want to be a distraction. And I like that he took responsibility, which is not what we've seen from the two conservative candidates that were let go yesterday. Although I'm not sure about the third one, whether he took responsibility, but there was a lot of blame to the party on letting them go. And I just want to say that as an elected official who's been who's had some of those attacks leveled at me, it's really disappointing to hear another elected official talk about it as a joke. It's not a joke for my kids and my parents to have to listen to those things. And I think taking responsibility for those things shows a lot of integrity. And it does make you question, like Taras said, about some of the vetting processes, but certainly it speaks a lot to the integrity of the candidates.
Thank you so much. I want to thank our panelists, Alicia Higgison with the Liberals, Al Teshuba with the Conservatives, and Taras Natyshak with the NDP. They will be back with us again next Wednesday at this time to discuss the campaign stories that come up over the next 7 days. Thank you.